Thanks for being with me. My name is Bert Brooks. I'm located in the Richmond, Virginia area. I am an elder in the Virginia Conference of the United Methodist Church, and this has been my ministry for some time, helping churches to grow their stewardship ministries. And so that's what I hope to do in our course. So if you have signed up for CEU credit, thank you. I'm looking forward to awarding that to you. According to the folks that allow me to do that, they say that you need to attend all 3 sessions and do any outside reading. But we operate on the honor system here. So if you do that, that's great. Others are lay people and church staff that are on this, and we want you to get as much out of it as you possibly can so that you can help be in leadership for stewardship. So that's kind of my quick introduction. Does anybody have anything they need to share with me or the group before we get started? If so, just unmute yourself and let us hear from you. Everybody good? Okay. Well, we're going to, I don't have a high-end presentation with lots of PowerPoint slides and video clips and the other things that perhaps we need in this environment. I'm coming to you not as a teacher, but as a consultant, as if you have invited me to come to your church and say, let's move to the next level. And so that's where I'm coming from. I'm not coming with books to read and handouts. I'm coming to, you know, for lack of a better term, I'm gonna see what the pH of your soil is at your church and see if it's growing anything, and what do we need to do to grow better stewardship ministries at your church. And so that is a lot of talking on my end, which is tough on your end. So if you need to get a cup of coffee, feel free to do what you need to do. I will record these sessions so that if you ever want to show them to your ad council or your stewardship committee or whoever, you're welcome to do that. And I will give these to you per your request. 3 sessions is all we need. We really don't need 15 weeks of a seminary class to talk about stewardship unless we were really going to get into the theology in greater depth than I'm going to do. And so we're going to look for practical ways that we might take the next step. What I want you to get from this is an idea or 2. Because I know that in my years of pastoring, if you give me too many good ideas, I won't do anything with any of them. Overwhelmed with too many good ideas. So the point is, pick up 1 or 2 things that you might want to do in the next year or 2 and really develop it. And then as you develop that, go to something else. So that's really all I want. I want you to pick up an idea. I'm going to throw out a bunch of seeds. You know, let's just see if any of them land and grow. Now, here's something fun. Just reminded of it. We have people registered from the Western North Carolina Conference, the North Carolina Conference, the Virginia Conference, the Baltimore-Washington Conference, and the West Virginia Conference, which is really the membership area of the United Methodist Credit Union. But I see, and I saw this come in, we have someone from Minnesota on the call. And so I want to ask Brian Cornell. Brian, how did you find out about us? We're the best kept secret in all of United Methodism. So how did you find out about us?
Well, I'm sharing you with one of my phenomenal Minnesota associates, Ted, who is the Theodore's iPad, is my finance chair. But I am a East Tennessee native by way of Western North Carolina for 20 years, and then moved up here to get a little elbow room.
Okay, well, that's great. We're glad to have you and glad to have everybody who is participating today, and hope that you'll get a lot out of this. A good starting point for us is to be reminded that our Wesleyan theology is always helpful, always helpful when it comes to matters of stewardship, because we believe that we respond because God has already responded. In other words, we're free to give because we've been given to. We're free to forgive because we have been forgiven. Unlike what you might see on television, we don't have to jumpstart God's goodness with money. In other words, when we give, it's not to get God to do something. It is because God has already done something. Would we agree with that? And so stewardship is a response to what has already been a blessing to us. And God, we believe, is a God of abundance, and that God continues to bless God's people and God's church. And therefore, this cycle never ends of blessing and response and blessing and response. It just keeps going. You've heard that cliche, you can't outgive God. When I first heard it, I had to think about that a little bit, but over the years, it has become part of my experience. God gives, I give. God gives, I give. It just, is a wonderful theology to hold on to when we're talking about stewardship growth. We have a biblical basis of our stewardship. We understand such things as first fruits. We understand the concept of the tithe. Part of what God has given us is returned for God's work. We understand the idea of abundance, that God is the God of abundance, as I said earlier, that even in scarce times, God is still the God of abundance. There is enough. I think of the widow's mite. I think about the jug of oil and the little bit of meal in the jar from the Old Testament. It seemed like God was always able to get through even the leanest of times with just the right amount of abundance. And so I think all of that becomes part of our theological basis as we begin to grow our stewardship ministry. What does stewardship look like in your church? If you're a small church and you invite me in and say, let's talk stewardship, I'm going to probably not find anything. I'm going to search everywhere, and I may not find anything that says stewardship. Or I might, I don't know. But many small churches, small membership churches, don't really, at least in my experience, have identifiable stewardship ministries. There might be a sermon, there might be a book, but it may not be on a calendar anywhere. I might not see a person who is the stewardship leader or the chair or whatever. So the small church has a tremendous opportunity for growth. Even if it's 5 people on Sunday, I know what to say. I know what to look for. 10, even better. So the small church has a lot of possibility. Why does the small church not really have a stewardship ministry? My theory is, I don't have the data, is because the smaller church very much operates on we don't talk about money here. We always get our bills paid. We've been here a long time and we've never had to do this. And so it kind of just stops you in your tracks when you want to bring it up. The other theory I have is that many small membership churches are entry-level churches, and those pastors move through quickly. And so by the time, the thought of stewardship comes around, new appointment or a new chair or new something. So there's really no traction there for many of the small membership churches. If you're in a mid-sized church, let's say your worship attendance is 100, 150, 200, then what I would see when I come in your church is probably a sporadic stewardship ministry, hit or miss. Some years we have a campaign, some years we don't. Pastor X was real big on stewardship. Pastor Y hasn't mentioned it. And you might see kind of some, starts and stops around stewardship over the course of the last several years. Then again, you may find a very solid stewardship ministry. I'm just kind of generalizing right now. So in the mid-sized church, there's the opportunity for consistency. And there's the opportunity for advanced planning, even 2-3 years out when it comes to a stewardship ministry. The large church, I should be able to find a stewardship ministry before I ever get through the narthex. I might see, anything from a kiosk. I might, see literature, the stewardship ministry, a brochure, a web page. I might see the date of an annual campaign. I might see a capital campaign in motion. I might see a brochure or web page on endowment giving. In the large church, you have to see the whole thing to manage a large church. There's nothing you can kind of neglect. Now, this is what I do find in large churches. I find large membership churches who have new pastors who may be coming from a mid-size or even a non-pastoral environment, and they're not up to speed on stewardship ministry. So then it becomes kind of hit or miss, kind of sporadic until they realize that you can't be silent and fund a $1 million budget every year or $2 million budget or whatever it might be. So their growth opportunity would be to really devote resources and perhaps even have a staff person who is marked for stewardship ministries to make that growth. So those are some generalizations. Small church, sometimes nothing. Mid-sized church, sporadic. Large church, essential, absolutely essential. And let me just give you some scenario, or at least one scenario, that if somebody, layperson or clergy, would go ahead and make this move, it would benefit years to come. People have the definition of wisdom is to plant trees that you will never sit in the shade under. That's some of the things that we can do also. I'm working with a church that's 68 years old. Now, that goes back to the 1950s, does it not? If you do the math correctly. They've had 3 generations pass through that church. 3, maybe even 4, I don't know. Having financial problems. When we looked at kind of the accounts, I want you to guess how much money they had in an endowment account. Does anybody want to guess? It's not hard. I guarantee you some of them would. 0. Okay, you hear what I'm saying? Somebody has got to play the first card on this so that future generations can have something to work with. This is tragic, I think, that these folks, they live their lives out, they left their money to somebody, but nobody brought it up that they might, consider the church in their estate plan. So we're going to talk about that. A lot of our problems are our creation. It's not the interest rate. It's not the economy. I listened to this motivational speaker, Jim Rohn. He's been dead for 20 plus years. You might cross his paths on YouTube. But he says people will ask him this question: do you think things will be better next year? And he said, I suspect that if you don't change anything, they'll be about the same next year as they are this year. So in other words, the external circumstances do not necessarily create internal changes. Internal changes now could affect external circumstances. And so I want you to think about that when you're looking at your stewardship ministry. What can I do? I may never, as pastor here or as staff here or clergy, or as layperson here, I may never see the fruits of this, but at least we're going to plant the tree while I'm here with the hope of future fruit. Are you with me so far? You understand what I'm seeing when I'm looking at your churches? Okay, so and all of this is doable. Most of you, I would think, have a foundation office in your conference that could help with all of these matters, every one of these matters. Okay, so good. You're with me so far. So let's talk a little bit about the language that we use when we talk about stewardship, when we talk about fundraising, when we talk about money, because our language is rich. And our language also needs to express what we're trying to say. Stewardship language uses words such as generosity, giving, growing, gratitude, tithing, first fruits. That's stewardship language. Fundraising language uses words like this: budget, income, expenses, year to date, surplus, shortage. Do you see how those words just almost go to opposite ends of the vocabulary? Now, here's something that I'm going to share with you that you're not going to read in a book. It only comes from Bert Brooks. See, and if you get nothing else out of this, I'm giving you a pearl of wisdom right now. Stewardship words are about the individual, growing, spiritual, about how I move forward in my discipleship. Stewardship words are about me getting better and better, about my discipleship commitment, more and more growth. You see, it's about me. And that's what prayer is about, isn't it? That's what mission is about. That's what, our theology is about. It's about helping me grow as an individual. Fundraising vocabulary is about the institution. It's about the institutional needs. Our budget next year has gone up 5%. Okay, that's an institutional comment, is it not? Income to date is $1,000 short. That's institutional. We have a shortage going into the third quarter of 5% institutional. So what I'm trying to lay out for you is make sure you're using the right language for the right context. And here's where I think if we could kind of sort this out a little bit, is that too oftentimes we use institutional language with the hope that there's going to be some stewardship response. In other words, folks, it's December 1st, and we're behind budget by $1,000. Could you increase your stewardship during the month of December? You see, that's confusing to me, because I thought you asked me to do a stewardship response of a tithe or of whatever I decide to do. Way back last year this time, I didn't know you were going to then at the 12th month ask me to change that, because that is not where it's supposed to be. Now you understand that I'm talking best case scenario in everything I do. I'm not saying it's got to be this way, because I know as a pastor of many years that it just doesn't work this easy as what I'm telling you. But I think if you know what you're talking about, there's a good chance I, in the pews or in the chairs or online, will hear it the way it needs to be heard. Take that a little bit further. In December, if we're short on budget, we are really talking about fundraising. And let's be real clear about that. Folks, we need to raise $3,000 by the end of the year. We're not really talking about stewardship. We're talking about fundraising. And then you frame it somehow and how you will accomplish that fundraising goal. Fundraising to me is not a negative concept at all. When I'm not doing stewardship education, I'm helping churches with capital fundraising. And it's not negative, it's very positive. It moves the church forward. But we know that in this 36 months, we are raising funds of X dollars to accomplish X project. That is not about growing and giving in proportion to your income. That's something else. That has its value. This has its value. It's just a matter of being clear on what we're trying to communicate. So fundraising is no problem with me. It has a place in the church. But stewardship, growing your givers in their individual path of discipleship, is what I'm trying to accomplish in this Stewardship Academy. Let me stop and let you catch your breath. Any comments so far from anybody? Just again, unmute yourself and make your comment. Shannon Berry, yes.
I do go by Shannon Marie.
Okay,
and
Shannon
I
Marie.
apologize. I'm a week out of COVID and my voice is not all the way back yet. So
I understand. Yes.
I'm thinking about how to word. First of all, in my time, in my current appointment, I've created, I say I because I pushed them hard. I created 3 endowments, and we're getting ready to celebrate those endowments on Sunday. I've created a brochure that I can take to congregants when somebody passes and say, these are ways you can give to our congregation as a memorial, because they love memorials here. I'm including our general budget as a way to give and the 3 other endowments, but I'm thinking about bulletins. And at this time in our bulletin, we list stewardship every week, stewardship report, but it says church budget, weekly budget needed, year-to-date actual, year-to-date needed. And I'm just trying to brainstorm what are different ways to give that, to move away from, what are creative words to perhaps change that to? Because I do have a lot of business people in my congregation that really do understand the budget side of life, which makes me very happy because I was a administrator previous life. And so how do we turn that on its head when we're doing these types of just reporting out?
I'm going to give you the short answer. Maybe you and I can talk about it more after the class. But essentially, this has been my opinion. You don't put that in the Sunday bulletin because visitors don't need to see all of that family business. So I would encourage churches that they can get away with it. You don't put it. That is internal affairs that go into your weekly e-news or your monthly newsletter. That's the short answer. I think it's fine to have the finance chair's column, just like you're doing, because that way we're saying this is not a stewardship reporting here. This is just purely what it is. It's a budget reporting, and maybe put at the top budget reporting and just let people see numbers. So stewardship then is more, we're going to talk more about the fact that they're intimately related, but in the reporting, they're very much separated. So that's one answer. I don't think we need to tinker with the language because it ends up with the same numbers. No matter what the language is, the numbers are the same. So I wouldn't spend a lot of time with that, but I would make sure that, again, this is family business, and whatever kind of communication the family gets outside of Sunday morning would be my recommendation. So that's my short answer, Shannon Marie. But we can talk more about that. It does concern me if I'm a visit to your church and I see a big fat negative number in your bulletin beside the Lord's Prayer. I'm going to wonder why, if I want to stay in this church, are they going to pray for me, or they just need my electronic giving routing number here? So yeah, don't give off the signals that you don't want to give off in your Sunday presentation, however that is, on the screen, on the smartphone, on the traditional paper bulletin. Now, you may get kickback from that. And I understand then it's a balance. But I gave you the best case scenario for a churches that probably don't do best case scenarios sometimes. All right,
Just
good
a
question.
follow-up to that real quick.
Yeah.
What would you think about leaving off the needed actual, but just doing a report of what the giving last week was, and putting that number in there for the
I think
people
that's all right.
that'll lose their minds, but just not give them the full, and then move that into the newsletter piece?
Exactly. And this is good for everybody. Ultimately, surplus and shortage means nothing until the end of the year. It really doesn't. It's not even a real number, because traditionally so much of that comes in December. So if you show a shortage all year long, just think about the morale of that. And then in December, it usually, will clear itself up pretty good. So yes, I think you can put raw numbers, but don't do, subtractions and additions and need it to date. And again, unless you do it in your internal documents, not your Sunday bulletin. I want to keep that as positive. I mean, we just need to have a good presentation of our congregations when guests come. So that's my answer. It may not work for everybody, but that's just what I'm thinking. Good. Okay. Brian, one quick question from you.
It seems like you're making a very strong delineation between what's your front-facing publications that could be seen by others and kind of internal documents. And within our small congregations, they're one and the same a lot of the times. Right. So can you speak to that for a moment?
Well, if you can't separate it, you can't separate it. I mean, I don't say that's a bad decision, but if you can, I would recommend that. In smaller congregations, you may not have a steady stream of visitors, and it really is family business on Sunday. Or, after the service, maybe you could pass out the numbers once a quarter or once a month or whatever, and not include those in the bulletin. Brian, I'd be glad to brainstorm with you later about that. But if you can't, you can't. Again, I'm trying to create a best case scenario for this. And I know that it can't be done in some places that easily. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm on your side, Brian. We do what we can do. Good question. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to kind of the future of stewardship at your church, the future of it. All ages need stewardship training. I mean, we do in some way, shape, or form. And I'm not 100% convinced of the myth that our grandparents' generation were givers. I'm not 100% convinced of that. or our great-grandparents, and then they taught the next generation how to give, who taught the next generation how to give. I don't know that to be so. I don't know that my parents, as good a church members as they were, ever taught me a thing about tithing or giving. And so the point of that is we probably needed stewardship education back then also, but it all seemed to balance out. So we didn't really have to go there. Today, everybody needs some form of stewardship education because we will have people who come who have no church exposure, not only in their lifetime, but their parents had no church exposure. So we're almost starting at zero when it comes to much of our ministry. It's not just stewardship, but we may need to have to start prayer at square one. What is prayer? How do we pray? Why do we do mission? Why do we do outreach? Why do we do faith sharing? It probably is not working in our favor to assume that any congregation moving forward will have even an elementary understanding of spiritual disciplines. And certainly stewardship is in that group. So we will almost need by default to raise stewardship ministry to a higher profile in the life of the church. Stewardship ministry, when we finish here, I'm trying to say to you that this could be quite inspiring, stewardship ministry. It could be quite life-giving. It could be quite transformative if it's presented in a way that stretches people to make these life-changing decisions about how they organize their God-given gifts. You know, we do see in the parable of the talents that apparently if you put your life to work, it seems to make the master happy. If you don't put your life to work or any of your God-given gifts, it seems to say, wait a minute, what did you do? So our call is always to help people to use what they have in very vital and useful ways. So stewardship is a spiritual discipline, just like any other spiritual discipline that you are trying to help your congregation achieve. Here's how we can just ruin the whole thing. You ready to write this down? How to ruin stewardship ministries in your church. The first way is to apologize for it. Folks, I know you don't like to talk about money, and Lord knows I don't like to talk about it, but we have a budget. And so this year I'm going to preach on stewardship. Now, how many conflicting comments came out of that? I mean, you can just count them. So there needs to be a confidence in a stewardship presentation, a confidence with pastoral leadership, a confidence with staff leadership, a confidence with lay leadership, that this is just part of who we are as Christians. No apologies, no backing down, lay it out in wonderful, life-giving ways. And I think people do respond well to that. And yes, we're talking about money, sure. Everybody's got money to do something with. Some have more than others, some have less than others, but this is just how we take that asset, that God-given asset, and we get the biggest investment possible from it. And so stewardship ministry is essential. I worked with one church, and maybe I should save this for next week. And I asked him, I said, how are you going to do your annual campaign this year? He says, we've got that down. We take last year's card and we scratch out last year's year, and we scratch in this year's year, and we send it out and ask them to turn it back in. That's the annual campaign, isn't it? Well, I guess it is. Question my mind. I know we're blessed by God. I do, and I take the idea of blessing very seriously. And my only goal in life, I think, is to help folks receive that. But I have to ask the question, how can so many do so little and get so much? There's a blessing right there. Who said that? Churchill about something. He didn't say it like that. I rearranged that completely. But how are so many thankful to so few who gave so much? It was something like that. But we continue the ministry year after year after year with doing, a little bit here and a little bit there. Just imagine if we took the fig tree that hadn't been producing and we gave it another year and we dug around it and we fertilized it. I almost guaranteed that next year there would be figs on it. Did you all preach on that one last Sunday? The parable of the fig tree. That's a stewardship. That is a stewardship model right there that you could use sometime. It just says that parable just says a fig tree by nature produces figs. It just does. It was created to produce figs. If it's not, then perhaps it hasn't been. Let's tend it. Let's see what's going to happen with it. And then it very well may produce figs. I mean, that story, we don't know. We don't know because the story just ends right there. But I'm led to believe that the advice to tend it was good advice, and that if we did have an ending to that story, it would be positive. So think about these things. The more you think it through, the more you kind of put some plans in motion, the better. Can the finance committee be the stewardship committee? That's my next question. Can the finance committee be the stewardship committee? Can the pastor be the stewardship committee? Well, if I had to say one or the other, I'd have the pastor be the stewardship committee, not the finance committee. But I would rather to have some people who feel called to that ministry to really stay together 2 or 3 years as a stewardship team so that they could study and grow together. That would be my ideal. Now, the stewardship chair may be a member of the finance committee, but not necessarily. I don't know what our discipline, I forgot what our discipline says about the makeup of the finance committee. Maybe stewardship chair is part of that. But can the finance committee be the prayer team? Well, we would say no to that. Can the finance committee be the mission team? We'd probably say no to that. Can the finance committee be the stewardship team? We would probably say no to that. And at the same time, we might just bunch all that together, which I would recommend if you could separate that out. I think that would allow both areas of ministry to not kind of become codependent on each other in short run matters. I don't want the scenario where there is a financial issue and they look to the stewardship team to solve it. You see, that's a fundraising issue at that point. Stewardship is, again, long-term. We're growing givers. So we want to set this up for success. We want to set the finance committee up for success. We want to set the stewardship team, even if it's just 2 or 3 people, plus the pastor. I would say this, the pastor is always on the stewardship team. I don't even know an exception to that. So I know we have lay people here, we have pastors, we have church staff. Pastor's not on the stewardship team. I don't know what level of effectiveness that you will have. Many years ago, Adam Hamilton said at a seminar that the pastor is the chief development officer of the church, which I agree with that 100%. If the pastor is not encouraging the raising of stewardship so that the level of ministry can increase, then we're really not going to go anywhere. We're going to be kind of stuck where we are. So, Brian, you got another question for me, or are you just giving me an amen?
No, I'll give you amens too, Bert. But we are getting ready to transition our congregation to the now model of ministry, which you may be familiar with: nurture, outreach, witness. If I had to pick one of those three to incorporate stewardship, which one would you select?
Nurture.
Nurture. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be the most obvious place for it, because
Thank
that
you.
nurture sounds like growth to me, that you're growing. Yeah. Okay, that was a softball pitch. Throw me a hard one next time. Okay. All right. Does anybody want to stop me just a second? Is this generating any other, quick questions? You are doing great. You're hanging in here. You're doing great. And I'm just going a mile a minute. Okay, we're good. Okay. Ann, I see you up in my corner.
Yeah, I'm just taking a whole bunch of notes. This is great stuff. This is great.
Okay. And I see another Ann. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay, Ann Kilborn, I see you.
My question is this: you said that this is being recorded. I am
Yes.
neither a minister nor am I a stewardship person. I'm a member, well, in fact, the chair of the leadership council in my church. Nobody else could come. This is being recorded. Where can I direct them to access this academy?
So I usually download this to YouTube, to my personal account, and then I send the link out to whoever wants it. So I'm glad to do it. It takes, as you know, with YouTube, it's sometimes iffy as to when it's available, but as soon as it's available, I'll send it out. So absolutely. And I encourage you to, share snippets of this with the appropriate folks in your congregation. If you think I can be the out of town expert that comes right to your meeting and maybe help move things along. Good questions. I'm going to save the chat until the end. I see a few good questions coming in, but I want to finish my material and then we'll chat some. Okay, so we need to always talk about a language of growth when we're talking about stewardship, personal growth. We don't need to speak the language of fear or skepticism or anything. So it's all positive. We want to keep this in a positive. And in a theological sense, then we're being faithful to our understanding of God's response. When it comes time for a stewardship sermon series or stewardship class, it's a challenge. It's not punitive. It's not, we got to get you folks on board with this. It's always a challenge. And if you get just a small percentage of people who say, yes, I get it. Yes, I get it. Then that is good. And then you continue this ministry over the course of time in your various pastorates, and you will see growth in generosity, growth in giving, and growth in discipleship. So it makes sense that if you grow your stewards on this side, there's a good chance you'll grow your budget on this side. You see how it works? If I'm going to put my effort into it, then I want to grow givers so that I will have ministry funds over here. The idea of theology is that, we bring our offerings to God. God doesn't have to chase them down and keep begging for them. Like so oftentimes we do. We bring, in some of the work that I do in the capital campaign work, they'll ask, do we need to follow up? do we need to chase down? I say, you know, we're not going to chase God's gifts. We're going to continue to encourage people to bring God's gifts to the mission field, to the altar, to the ministry at hand. And so I think that all that makes a difference. Okay, today's topic is creating a yearly stewardship plan, and I'm just gonna make this as simple as possible. If I come to your church, I'm going to ask you to show me your yearly stewardship plan. Just make me a copy real quick in the office there, and let's go through it. And you might tell me, oh, we don't even know what that is. Or we started it, we didn't finish it, or here it is. Here it is. Now, this doesn't have to be complicated. It just starts with a calendar. And you can put it on your piece of paper right now, January, February, March, all the way down to December. And you can then decide what kind of stewardship ministries you might do in your church over that 12-month time period. Let me stop. Your assignment between now and next week is to create a 12-month annual stewardship calendar. And you can start it in January of next year, or you can start it, you know, in April of this year. Just let it go out 12 months from whenever you start. And this is, you know, your working document. You can decide what to do with it later. If you want to do anything, you can decide. But on this 12-month plan for the small membership church, I would like to see no less than a 4-week preaching series on stewardship. Even if you leave everything else blank, I would like to see that somewhere. A 4-week preaching series on our theology of giving, on our practice of giving, on how we grow as stewards. And there's abundant resources out there, preaching resources and teaching resources. So if that's all you put, your small membership church, I'm not even asking you to collect pledge cards. Not asking you to do anything. Just you encourage your pastor, if there are, you know, lay people, to have a 4-week solid stewardship preaching series. Okay? Well, small membership church, you're done with the assignment, if that's as far as you want to go with it. All right? Mid-sized church, at minimum, I would like to see on your annual stewardship calendar an annual campaign as a response to your 4-week stewardship sermon series. In other words, your folks would turn in a pledge card. They would turn in a pledge card. Okay? Mid-sized church. Large church, same as mid-sized church. You're going to have a good, solid, depth 4-week sermon series with other peripheral things going on. Annual campaign prayer, prayer walk, prayer materials, stewardship materials, resulting in a pledge card. Okay? If that's all you're going to do, small, medium, large, that would be the minimum that you put on your annual calendar. Any questions so far? Then we're going to fill in the blanks now, small, medium, large. Do you have a question about that? Okay, we're good to go. All right.
What was the last piece on the large church?
resulting in a pledge card. Is that what?
Yes, thank you.
Answer? Yeah, it results in a pledge card turned in. So, all right. So that to me is a minimum for everybody. Now, the small membership church, if it would work for your folks to turn in a pledge card, then I would add that. But I would rather have the preaching series with less friction if I can get that. And so we want to reduce the friction at all possible in whatever level you are so that we can do the teaching. We can do the teaching. Now, just fill in these blanks. Now, I'm just going to throw stuff out to see if it fits your church. In January, I would get a local attorney to do a wills and estate seminar free of charge. That way they can tell your folks what the latest tax implication, how to do a will, how to answer questions about that. And many of them will come free of charge if there's someone in your community that does wills and estates. If it isn't, I would find a good video on wills and estates, a reputable one, and perhaps invite people to take a look at that at a special stewardship night. Okay, again, if you can't find a real person, let's do a video, or even better than that, if you can get somebody to Zoom it. They don't have to be in your community, but if somebody knows an attorney or someone who has knowledge about this, they may be a development officer at your local community college, your local college, some of your local charities. They know a lot about this. So I would get your contacts and see if they couldn't do a presentation there. In February, while it's still winter, I might put in a personal financial management course for the community. And I don't know if Dave Ramsey in that genre is worn out, but there's a good chance people in your own church will not come to it because they don't want anybody to know that they might have financial problems. But at the community level, almost at the same kind of thing as a AA or NA, where others can come, they might come for a financial management seminar, such as a Dave Ramsey Financial Peace or one of your liking. So maybe in February, I would do that. And again, what is the purpose of these two? Help us grow, help us understand not only the theological call to growth, but some practical implications. We've got to be realistic about how givers are treated supposedly by tax law and by this, that, and the other. And the more information we have, perhaps the more confident I will be in giving. In March, you might just, have a youth financial management workshop. Teach our youth how to, I don't know if checkbooks, it's all electronic, but how to manage some very basic kinds of ideas. And I was also thinking in March, if you have some upcoming college students, maybe a financial aid person from a local college could come and talk about scholarships and talk about how to fund a college education. So again, no cost to you, but very important to me sitting in the pew as I think about, gosh, where is my money going to come from to take care of everything that I'm responsible for? In April, you might have a session called Planning a Christian Memorial Service, so that people will know what to do in those last hours and then in those day or two or three after one dies, what decisions need to be made. I really had good, kind of a good turnout when I sponsored those kinds of classes, because people want to know, what if, I don't want to go too in depth in this, but you can think it through. What if I'm in the hospital room and my loved one dies. Well, what am I going to do? Who do I call? What kind of decisions do I have to make? And if we can prep our people so that they have at least a little bit of confidence in their grief, that they don't get taken by somebody, or they just don't know where to turn. That is truly, to me, one of the best pastoral kinds of things you could do for somebody, to help them, know what to do in that moment. The other thing that I would put in that, I would just kind of slip in estate plans too. You want to have your estate plan already in motion, and remember the church in that estate plan. See, again, we've got a lot of ways that we're helping people grow, and at the same time, the church is perhaps growing its ministry. And then the next thing I would put in something like that, and this was always something that I had to shake my head as a pastor, is a member of the church passes away, a long-term faithful member, and then I read the obituary, or I see it come through and it says, please make memorial gifts to the local library. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. We need the local library, but how come they didn't make some gifts to the church? They were in the church the whole time. Why didn't they do that? So in this planning a Christian memorial service, you also add that. Be sure to tell your heirs that you want memorial gifts, spelled out. Church, library, college, whatever. And I'll tell you what happens there. My wife is part of a continuing care community. She's on staff there as a chaplain. And what she finds out in those continuing care communities is that at the moment of death or prior to death, out of town adult children, way out of town, will come in to make the final arrangements. Well, they didn't know that mom or dad had a special place in their heart for, the local church or, the fire department or whatever. So they end up directing memorial gifts to their favorite charity. You see what I'm saying? Now, in a small community, it might not be like that, but in the larger communities, many adult children may not be familiar with the church that their parent has been involved in, because they've moved communities, they've traveled, they've been parts of different things. So you want to make sure then that you help train people when they are healthy, and to write this down so that these instructions are there. That's just an idea for April. In May, I would just designate that a tithing month. Can you tithe 1 month? That's it. You figure out what it is. No cards, no envelopes, no nothing. Just a tithing month. And the nice thing about that is if people will take you up on it, it might get you through the summer slump when people are a little bit less than, they're traveling and doing other things. June, maybe, I don't know what you could do. Maybe you could have someone to talk about endowment at the church. Maybe your foundation person, a foundation staff person could come and just talk to the church about how to, set up an endowment, or how to jumpstart a default endowment, which means, can we get it back on its feet again? In July, again, I'm just throwing stuff out. Maybe you have a Medicare seminar on current, the current rules for Medicare. And this is not only for people of that age, but it's also for adult children who have parents of that age. And it would help them understand, what's going on with their parents' health insurance. In August, you probably want to plan for your fall preaching series or your fall campaign. You want to start getting that in motion. Don't want to wait till the last minute on that. September, maybe you have another tithing month to get on the back end of the summer slump. So you have a tithing month in September. Again, it's just a challenge. It's not anything that becomes formal. October-ish, that is your preaching series, your annual campaign, October, November timeframe, perhaps. Then November, perhaps a year-end tax seminar. And here's what you need to know. What I've learned is that your college and your graduate school and your SPCA and your Habitat for Humanity is going to start sending out their year-end material the first week of November. So if you in the church are going to encourage year-end giving, you can't wait till the middle of December to mention it. You have got to get in front of this thing because would you agree with me? We're getting all of the literature in before Thanksgiving now for year-end giving. So you want to get in front of that early November. And then in December, you might just want to have some gifts to the mission fund as kind of, instead of giving poinsettias, you give to the mission fund or to some local charity. Those are ideas that can be used in all of your churches, all of them. And they're all helpful to people's personal financial management and also benefit the church. So your assignment per se is to just see if any of those will work as you think about your stewardship ministry in those 12 months. Okay, let me stop a minute and see if any thoughts on this annual stewardship calendar concept. Ken, I see you. Ken Hook?
Yes, thank you. One of the things we've started doing in our stewardship committee is to put a monthly thing in our bulletin called Signs of the Kingdom. And that tells the congregation what they are doing in mission around the world and in the local community. We're writing it in a way in which we're not saying that our church is doing this. We're saying that you are doing this. And as we make people more aware of what they do in mission and how they're bringing God's kingdom in the local community by feeding the hungry and all sorts of things, housing those that don't have housing, makes them more aware of how they are in the game. And I also run a foundation that's separate from the church. And as we changed our messaging to from what our foundation did to what the giver does with his gift, our donations in the first year went up 30%.
Great.
In hopes of achieving something similar in the congregation. The problem is everybody doesn't read the bulletin. When you send it out by email, you only get 20% open rates, and they're not reading the message. So the challenge I think we all face is how we get it in front of people to where they read it.
Yes. Well, it's hard because, as you know, your email boxes are just full of everything. And unless you're intentional about it, it might be that you need to link it. One of the things I've encouraged pastors to do is always link their online service with their weekly newsletter. Don't make people search it out. Put it in their hands. Just drop it in their lap every week. And little things like that where you find ways to not make them work, but by literally putting it in their hands. But it sounds like that's what you're doing. So that's just a suggestion I've had to some of the large churches I've worked with. It's called, it's it's redundancy. You know, you can go to the website and get it. You can watch it live. You can be in person, or you can get it on Monday in the pastor's letter. And so sometimes I think the pastor's letter needs to incorporate those links, because a lot of times people might read that pastor's letter before they look at all the announcements about, you know, that are going on in the life of the church. So it might be a matter of placing it in the most obvious place that people will at least read part of that newsletter. But anyway, those are just some ideas that I've come across. But good question. Thank you, Ken. When I talk about endowments, I'm going to mention that large churches might need to spin off their endowment to a foundation just to keep it going and active over the course of time. Okay, good questions, everybody. Let me just look and see what the chat is and see if I can come up with some quick answers to you. Current and next generation's mindset about pay to play, both in video games and now, so many choices religiously. How does stewardship work now? Well, it's never been easy. Stewardship has never been easy. My whole church life, I've not necessarily seen stewardship be the magic bullet to make all things well. So I think we continue to have to show people how meaningful their giving is, not just to their own growth, but it is making a difference. It is feeding hungry people in our own community. It is, helping people around the world do things. And I also think images and videos are so important. We go back to that old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. My mission chair can stand up and explain in words, all that we're doing. But when you get a few pictures of the church in ministry, I think people will invest in that. So that's my short answer. It's not easy, but we continue to work toward the life-changing aspects of Christian growth, life-changing aspects of Christian growth. And I think, we'll just keep doing it. So I'm not sure that is happening more and more, almost all of it to hospice now. You're right, we've kind of addressed that. All right, then. Well, that's enough for today, don't you think? Did you write down an idea or two? Let me just invite some quick feedback of maybe an idea that you're really going to kind of circle on your paper and say, I want to think more about this. Anybody give me anything?
I think your idea of having a tithing month, or like a month that you're really encouraging people, particularly to be generous in this month, is one that I see working really well in my congregation. I mean, my congregation typically gives sporadically anyway. There are probably only a handful of people who give a set amount every month. And so really setting aside a time to just say, hey, if we're going to give sporadically, let's really focus on this particular month and the impact that could have on our mission.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, David. Okay. One or two more. Anybody circle an idea? Too much to think about. I understand.
I was just glad to hear all the Southern accents. You all made me feel warm while it's in the 20s and frozen snow out here.
Do you have snow out your window, Brian?
Oh, last night it snowed good. Yeah. But the other thing is, I think the idea of May being the big push before the summer slumps, I mean, that made so much sense, because here in the summer, no self-respecting Minnesotan is staying around the church. They all go camping and they're gone for the 3 months of summer. They do not spend it inside. They've been inside. So that privilege of testing that is good. You know, the only thing I didn't hear you really address is electronic portals for giving. Maybe we'll hit that next time. But the pandemic has really changed some giving events too. And I want to hear your take on that maybe next time.
Yeah, we'll do that next time. We're going to talk about the annual campaign next week and the things that will help support that throughout the year. So yes, we'll talk a little bit about electronic giving and just where various churches are with that and what kind of experience we're having. So yes, let's touch on that next week. Josetta Franklin, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was gonna say that because my churches are so small, I was going to go with your idea to work through a 4-week camp stewardship campaign series. It's kind of figure out what that might look like. And probably the thing I will try to immediately put in place is not putting our family business in the bulletin. I know traditionally they've done that. This is my 3rd year pastoring them. And I think I'm at a place now where I can say I don't like this idea anymore. I haven't, and I've seen that mixture of the language. It says stewardship ministry, it says giving, and then it says our budget. And so there is a lot of conflict there. And I do think, coming from a Baptist tradition, that the way that you are encouraging us to teach stewardship in the United Methodist Church helps me to better understand how I can go back to my roots. Because that has really been a concern for me, and I did not know how to address it. When you talk about 2 very, very small congregations, and the people, what they do is they give towards something that needs to be done versus giving the tithe or doing first fruits and what those things I'm traditionally used to being told. You know, as leadership, nobody was allowed in my church to be in leadership unless they were tithing regularly as routine. And in this setting, it's very different. So I think those are the 2 takeaways for me to do immediately. And then because I have a newsletter article due on Friday, I think I'm going to start addressing stewardship.
Well, good. Thanks for sharing that. I might add to where I'm going with some of this. To me, the tithe is where we're going, progress toward the tithe, rather than necessarily cold turkey tithe. Progress. Next week, we're going to talk about the age-old concept of grow one, which is just as good today as it was, 40 years ago when I first read, well, not 40 years for me, but Herb Miller, who came up with this concept of Consecration Sunday. Had a chart in his first book called Grow One. We can call it whatever we need to, but it is really a step way of getting people to kind of grow in their giving. So I might say if giving is important for leadership, I might just say growing givers are important for leadership, perhaps more so than arrived givers who are already there, because growing givers can talk about their ongoing journey. Arrived givers pretty much are saying, look at me, I'm already here. I much rather hear journeys than, kind of, I'm at my destination, I've been here a long time. So
yeah, I like that.
yeah.
Because I know that because of the season that we've been in, and that's going to be something that's going to be much more appealing to people, because most of us are not in that place anymore.
Yeah,
Where we
exactly.
can just do a regular tithing, and now it is about a journey and making a new start, really.
Right. Yeah. I've kind of over the years kind of said, I think that is a more realistic way to keep people moving. And our Wesleyan theology of going on to perfection doesn't say we are perfect in the journey. It means that the journey continues to move toward that theological place called, Christian perfection and love. So I think John Wesley was very much about the journey rather than, kind of concentrating on the fact that the destination was here. So, Good job, everybody. Well, that's all for today, and hopefully you have some things to work with. So think about this annual stewardship calendar. I'm not going to ask you any more about it. It's all yours to do whatever you like with it, and we will see you soon. And David McWilliams, it's your turn to take care of the little one. I see. So seminar's over. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Y'all too. Bye-bye.